Hi everybody, Jim Spellman here, CGTN correspondent. I'm in East Palestine, Ohio. About 2.5 weeks ago, less than a kilometer away, a freight train derailed from the company Norfolk Southern, spilling toxic chemicals. So for a couple of days, you had a fire and a spill from that. 3 days after the initial crash, they decided to do a planned release of chemicals so pressure wouldn't build up and they wouldn't explode. That created a toxic plume that went through some of the air around here and potentially got into the soil and water like this creek. This is called Sulfur Run. It's a creek that runs right through the center of East Palestine. It literally runs through people's backyards. This carports are for some homes, and we interviewed a family that lives in one of these, and they used to come here all the time. Now they don't. Now this creek is off limits to them. Now I want to show you a little bit of what's being done to clean up, and I know it's a little bit noisy. This is called a water aerator. Peter here will show it to you. Basically a big pump pulls water out of the creek, mixes it with air, then shoots it back into the creek. I know it's very noisy right now. Don't worry, it'll quiet down shortly. And there's perhaps dozens of these all throughout town as they try to clear out this water. Now, the US EPA, let's hang on a second, we'll step up here. The US Environmental Protection Agency, as well as state officials and county officials, say that the drinking water comes out of people's faucets is safe, that the air is safe to breathe. They've tested over 500 homes inside the homes and found the air to be safe. They've also set up monitors around the city attached to things like telephone poles that are monitoring the air. They say the drinking water is safe. They say the air is safe to breathe. They basically say it's safe to live here. But we've been hearing troubling reports from people who've told us that the night of this controlled release, they started having their eyes water, their skin get itchy, breathing problems, headaches. And just today, 2.5 weeks after this began, the Ohio Department of Health set up a clinic for people who can make appointments and go and get checked out. It's not entirely clear at all if their symptoms are related to exposures they may have had or not. It's just not clear. But take a look here at the town. This is small town America, East Palestine, Ohio. We've gotten to know some families here, and the thing that we've heard, we'll go this way, up towards the train tracks. The thing that we've heard repeatedly from people is that they just haven't gotten the answers they need to feel safe. And some of those questions are, understanding more about exactly which chemicals were released during the crash. What happens to those chemicals? We can cross now, Peter. What happens to those chemicals when they burn? What happens when they get into potentially water, like the creek? What happens to their pets? What happens to farms in the area? What are the long-term ramifications of having been exposed to this? These are all the questions that we've heard repeatedly from people. So officials from the federal level on down have been here. In fact, just earlier today, the EPA administrator, Michael Regan, that's the federal agency in charge of the environment in the United States, held a press conference along with the governor of this state, Ohio, who's a Republican, and the governor of the state of Pennsylvania, just a few kilometers away, who's a Democrat. They're all trying, I think, to get the message out that it's safe. But what we hear from residents over and over again is that's not being backed up with the specific information that they need. Something that's been interesting to note is that this creek runs right through the center of town, as do the train tracks. So basically the first thing Norfolk Southern did, as soon as they could, was clear out the train tracks. So the trains run through here dozens of times a day. And it's very unnerving for people who live right along the train tracks. I mean, we've seen dozens, maybe even hundreds of trains go through here since we've been here, including big tanks that could have potentially toxic chemicals in them. So there's just been a lot of uncertainty. Now, we shouldn't exaggerate the hazards going on here, because this is in no way comparable to some large-scale environmental hazards that we've seen in the past. That's just simply not the case. Nobody died in the initial crash. We have no indication that anybody currently is experiencing major issues related to their exposure. So we'll get past this and we'll pause here for a moment. You do see signs throughout the city that will pop up with messages where people can call to get help, where they can call to get information. That's good. But it has been difficult, and I've been a little surprised. Here are the train tracks. Less than a kilometer this way is where the crash occurred. Over there, by the way, heavy machinery being used around the clock to dig up all of the soil that was potentially contaminated, ship it away for safe disposal. And I want to show you here the last thing that we're looking at. We've seen volunteers driving from 4 hours away, local church groups, nonprofits that have been coming and distributing water. In this case, we've seen volunteers, church groups passing out diapers, passing out food, passing out snacks. We've really seen the community come together, and that's good. Everybody's happy about that. But what they want to be sure is that they get the answers they need, they get the support they need, and they aren't forgotten, because the reality is, sooner or later, reporters will leave. They want to be sure that the government doesn't leave. They want to be sure that the railroad company, Norfolk Southern, isn't let off the hook for the damage they've done. There's just so much uncertainty about what the future is for this town, and that's been the overriding sense amongst the community since we've been here. So we'll sign off from East Palestine, Ohio. I'm Jim Spellman. Take care.